Hi, welcome to episode 512 of The Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Blue Sky. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my hand-spun yarn and knitting patterns. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, March 10th, and it is a beautiful day here just outside of Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri. I live in a suburb of Kansas City on the Kansas side, and it is beautiful today. It is in the 50s and sunny, and spring is around the corner. I still don't think we're done with cold. We had a cold snap mid last week, but by Friday it was back into the 50s, and it was lovely to walk outside this weekend. Just really a breath of fresh air, especially for those of us who enjoy spring's temperatures. So I hope that you're doing well. I had a relaxing weekend, but I also felt like I got some done. I did not get as much knitting done this week as I wanted. Some nights my arm was bothering me and I didn't feel quite as motivated this week, but I have lots of little bits to show you. So I have two knitting projects, some spinning, and I was going to show you the very beginning of my, I am quilting my quilt. So that is what I have for you today. I did not get a fresh cup of tea because I have half a cup of coffee here. It has gotten cold. But I also have a full Diet Coke, and so I feel like I probably have enough caffeine and don't need another one. So 2 beverages today, but I'm enjoying them and they're keeping me going throughout this day. So let's talk about what I have been up to knitting wise. So I cast on a new hat last week. I talked about it a little bit, and this is a hat that I'm knitting for charity. I am using, it is called the Simple Textured Stripes hat, I think, and it is by Sarah Shira. She is of Imagined Landscapes, and her hat actually calls for leftovers from advent sets or gnome kits or whatnot in fingering weight, but I'm still using worsted weight. That's just because I have lots of worsted weight scraps and I would like to get rid of them, and so I put together a selections of teals and blues, and I'm working on the hat, and I'm probably about 2/3 of the way done with the hat. I probably need another inch or so, and then I will be decreasing for the crown. The hat is available in sizes baby to adult, and what I am doing, like I said, it was written for fingering weight, so what I am doing is I cast on the cast-on number of stitches for the baby size, but then I am knitting it to between the medium and large adult size, and then starting on the crown that way. And because the pattern is basically a multiple of 8, it has been easy enough to do that. I'm not giving away any of the secret sauce. It's a pretty simple pattern, and so just knowing that multiple means that I'm able to make hats of the appropriate sizes. So I am on 6s and 8s, and again I am using leftover scraps, and so this is my green and blue one. This one I'm getting a little bit more creative because this one right here actually is 2 held together. It is some mohair and a fingering weight that I had that was kind of the right color, and then all of the others are bits and bobs left over from other projects, and they're all kind of in the teal and blue family, and I think it's coming together really nicely. I had a little bit of gray and white, and like I said, I don't have too much more, but this will just be another hat to go to charity. I have a variety of these color packs that I've made where I just have a bunch of bits and bobs of leftovers, and this hat is great for that because the most I ever really need is, like, I could do 2 rows here, or I could do 4 rows in the stripes here, and so it's great for all the little bits that I can't bear to throw away, but that aren't really useful for much of anything else. So I have a variety of color packs. I think I have a green and yellow one put together. I have another one that's kind of purples and darks, and I am just going to keep knitting hats and hopefully getting these out of stash and onto people's heads where they can keep them warm. My only complaint about the pattern, and this is not a complaint about the pattern or the pattern writer, is that it creates lots of ends because you are using lots of leftovers. So tackle these early and often, not like me, do as I say, or do as I say, not as I do. I need to tackle all of these. Maybe I'll work on that a little bit later this afternoon while waiting for things to process, because it's a lot of ends and it's very daunting. But the hat itself is really cute, and so I'm just going to make a bunch of these, and those will be my donations this year. So I'm excited about that, and should have that finished by the time I talk to you next, and maybe even have the next one started. So then the fun project that I'm doing right now, and I am doing this in between, I'm still working on that mosaic blanket. I'll bring it back next week so I can show you, but really it looks half a repeat or a repeat different, and it's the same pattern and the same two colors. So I'm not bringing it back every week because I just feel like it's boring. I am working on that. That is one of my goals this month and next month, to get as far as I can. I would love to finish it. I don't think I will finish it, but I'm working on that. But kind of my carrot and stick approach, where I'll do a bunch of work on the blanket and then I will kind of relax with a little project for me, is I am doing the Grid Gambit cowl, and that is by Samantha Guerin, and it is written for sport weight or DK weight yarn, and I am actually using kind of more of a fingering weight and a sport weight, and so I am modifying the pattern slightly and not well, so I don't know exactly how I'll explain what I'm doing, but I am knitting it from pattern, and the pattern is very well written. My concern is that because I'm using thinner yarn and slightly smaller needles, I didn't want it to come out too small or be too tight around my neck, and so I'm adding a little bit in there. So the two yarns that I am using are, my main color is, this is a Madeline Tosh Pashmina, which is her cashmere silk merino, and it is in the colorway Dust Weaver. So that's Madeline Tosh Pashmina. And that actual blend is 75 merino, 15 silk, 10% cashmere, and it's in just, it's a gray, but it's like lightly lilac almost, and it goes with this hand spun. This is a skein of, this is my hand spun, and the fiber is Marin's Pencils, and I believe it is from Three Waters Farm. I will pull that information and add it to the show notes. I think I said I was going to do that last week, but I think I might have forgotten, so I will add them both this week. But it is actually kind of a neon rainbow, although the strong colors are the pink and then the purple and then some green. And what I did is, I think I split the skein in half vertically down the braid, and then spun the two halves and plied them together. And my hope was that I would mostly keep the colors together, and it didn't work on the second half of the braid as well as it did on the first half. And of course the first half is in the center of the ball right now that I'm working from, so you can't see it, but you'll be able to sort of see it when I show you the cowl. So this is the Grid Gambit cowl, and as you can see, I've got my purples out here, and then I go through pink, and now I'm going into green and teal. And so that is where you can kind of see the colors together, and almost you can see kind of in different spots where they overlap. There was a little yellow and orange in there, so it kind of looks like a little bit of a neon rainbow, and I am really, really enjoying this. I'm pretty much working through a pattern repeat in an evening, which is just enough to get like a little taste of something fun and get to the next color, and I am mostly working per pattern. What I will say is that on the first chart, I sort of extrapolated and added 2 extra repeats to the first chart. The only problem with that is that the repeats and the increases and everything don't match up perfectly, so I'm a little bit off on the second chart because I have a few too few or a few too many stitches, and that's why I'm saying I'm increasing it but not doing that well. So I wouldn't necessarily excuse me, use me as an example. I'm sort of making it up as I go along, and it's not 100% per pattern. Basically, I wanted a little bit, so the way the pattern is knit, you knit it on the bias, and you start at the top corner, and it ends up being sort of a bandana kerchief, and 2 of the sides actually get kind of sewn together at the end, so it creates kind of like a kerchief cowl that meets at the back of your neck, so you don't have, it prevents it from being a small shawlette. It's what makes it a cowl and makes it easier to wear because it won't fall off. And I actually love that style. I just am still sort of working with how to make it work for what I'm doing. My problem was that I didn't think that it would be wide enough, and potentially that the back would be like the right length, and so I'm adding a little bit, which means I will also have to take out a little bit at the end to make it match up correctly, and I'm kind of winging it, and like I said, it's not 100% successful because at like one spot I had a few too many stitches, and at one spot I had a few too few stitches, and my pattern but I can kind of keep, at this point, I understand what the pattern is with these grids, and so I'm just working it in as I have enough stitches, and it won't matter. Nobody will be able to tell in the end, and there are no knitting police, so I'm just doing it my way. But I would say the pattern is expertly written, and if you are using the correct weight and gauge of yarn, you will have a very nice finished object, and if you want to play with it a little, you're welcome to, but you're totally on your own. So that is what I'm working on, and it is just making me absolutely gloriously happy just because it is so fun. And you can see so this is kind of the top corner, and I've started to switch shapes. This is technically the mirror opposite of the way it appears in the pattern, and that is because I knit left-handed and backwards, and so my patterns are the mirror opposite. So if you're knitting it, it will look more like this, but because I'm knitting it, it's going to look like this. So there you have it. But I love that. I'm going to take a photo of that for Instagram today because it's so pretty. Anyway, so I'm going to keep going on that and use that to kind of reward myself for doing all the other stuff. And I'm excited to see that finished. I have no deadline on it. I don't think it will take forever because it is just a cowl, but I'm using it just in little bits and savoring it. So, spinning, I have a very short update, but a fun one. I finished my first bobbin. So this is boiled sugar candy. It was I believe a December 2023 braid from Hello Yarn, and this time I did look up the details. It is a merino. It is a South African, no, it is a South American wool, and it is, I think, between 24 and 26 microns, which means it's pretty soft. And it is in lots of purples with a little bit of yellow. And I can show you what that looks like, sort of, a little bit. This is the last quarter ounce of the fiber, and it is kind of on the wheel now. It's attached over here to my second bobbin. So these are kind of the colors that you'll see in the skein. And I am spinning it as a fractal. So one side I broke into a bunch of tiny pieces, and one side I broke into two thicker pieces, and so it will do some subtle striping throughout the skein. So my hope is actually that I might finish those singles this week and maybe even get to ply this weekend, and I will have a skein of hand spun for the shop. My arm is feeling better, and I'm trying to do like 15 minutes a day, really just do a little bit every day, and not sit down for too long at it. And so I'm very pleased to have the first bobbin finished, and I'll be working on the second bobbin. So that brings me to the other thing that I did, which is quilting. So a couple weeks ago when I came home from QuiltNon, the retreat that I went to, I had a quilt top finished, and I was spending some time thinking about how I wanted it to look. And this week I cut the backing fabric because I needed to actually, my quilt is long enough that it needed, I needed to put two pieces of fabric together to make it work. So I cut my backing fabric and I sewed it together, and then it was actually too much because two pieces of fabric was, one piece of fabric was not long enough and two pieces of fabric was too long. So I chopped off a little bit to make it right in the middle, and I used that bit for my binding strips. And then I went ahead and laid out the quilt and pinned it together, kind of made my quilt sandwich, which is when you take the backing, layer the batting on top, and then layer the quilt top on top, and I got to get started quilting. So just so I can show you, this is the backing fabric that I chose to use. It's a really nice print. It is from Stephanie Organis Wandering Collection, and it is kind of a mod. It's just got a lot of little shapes, and it's really nice, and you can kind of see some of the quilting there. This is the front of the quilt. Like I said, this was the Beach Town fabric from Edita Sitar, which is Laundry Basket Quilts, and it was a layer cake that I received as a kind of a prize in a gift bag, and so I put it together into what's called the double slice quilt. It is a quilting tutorial from Jenny of Missouri Star, and basically you cut the squares in one direction and sew them back together, and then you cut the squares in the other direction and sew them back together, and then you sew them all the blocks together and you end up with a quilt. And my quilt is approximately 53 by 64, which is kind of a throw size quilt, and that is the biggest quilt that I have ever put through my machine and done on my domestic sewing machine at home. The last time I did a quilt that big, I actually sent it out to be quilted, and I will say that it is both easier than I thought and more of a pain in the butt than I thought. So the quilting of it is actually not terribly hard. I have been able to sort of break it down and work in small sections. The quilt is kind of big because remember, 60 inches is like 5 feet, and 53 inches is, you know, almost like about 4.5 feet, 4 and a bit. And so it is a decent sized quilt, and finding a place to like lay it out and assemble it all, like the small ones I can do on my dining room table. I can lay them out. I can get the fabric really flat. I can get the batting really flat. This one was just harder because I didn't have a really good hard surface to lay it out on. Probably next time I'll use my wood floor. I first laid it out on the carpet, but that just wasn't going to provide me with enough flat surface area. So I did lay it out on the dining room table, but every which way there were parts of it kind of hanging off the table, and I had to work in sections. And overall, I don't think I got everything kind of as tight and flat as I wanted it to. The second reason it's kind of crazy to quilt it on a domestic quilting machine is there's a lot of quilt that can't be under the machine at any given time, and that actually is quite heavy. I mean, it's not heavy in the sense that like I can't hold it in my arms, but it is heavy in the sense that like it pulls on the machine, and I have to constantly rearrange where the fabric is kind of on the table with me and with the chair next to me, and like keep it all on level with the quilt so that as I'm quilting there isn't a lot of pulling. And I mean, I don't know how to explain how there's weight there, but it's not, I mean, it's not that heavy because it doesn't weigh more than a couple pounds, but at the same time, like that pressure pulling out from under the sewing foot is actually like a decent amount of pressure. Anyway, part of the reason that I didn't start this 2 weekends ago is because I was trying to decide what quilt pattern I wanted to use. And there are lots of things you can do. You can do straight lines, you can do curves, you can do all kinds of things. You can use rulers, you can freehand it. And I wanted to freehand it, and so I needed to think about the design. And part of thinking about the freehand design is sort of doodling and figuring out your way in and out of each different design section so that you can continue to move around the quilt and so that you don't have to start and stop a lot. Not that you can't start and stop, but every time you start and stop, like not just like pause so you can readjust the quilt, but like every time you start and you you stop and you cut your threads and you restart again, you have more and more threads to bury. So the best, to sew in at the end, much like if you cut your yarn, you have to weave in your ends. So the fewer times you have to do that, the better. This is what I have settled on. And I wanted to show this to you, and I think you'll be able to see on a couple of the darker ones, maybe, yeah, I think here. You can probably see on that one. So you can see I'm doing like mini square patterns, and I'm kind of getting in and out of them and boxing around. And so that is what I am doing, and I am enjoying it. So far, I haven't gotten stuck very much. I'm having a little trouble with straight lines. Like I was really trying to do squares, and you can see that like all my lines are a little crooked. So I don't do straight lines so well, but because this is freehand, this is with your free motion foot, when you're able to move the quilt in all directions, the foot actually doesn't clamp down on the quilt as much. There's not as much pressure there. So like it won't literally just kind of sew in a straight line. Like it's a little loosey-goosey all over the place. So you have to do the guiding of it. Anyway, so I am doing the guiding of it, but I have I don't know, I'm not even a third done. I did like the top portion, corner, like all of this is done, but I still have plenty of the quilt left. So you can see there, that's a better representation. You can see like all the little boxes in there. So that's kind of how I'm quilting this whole quilt. It will show a little bit on the front, only in the really dark. Like it shows up a little bit on the light, but I'm quilting in like cream and white thread, so it's not going to show up a lot. And then it does show up a little bit on the back because it's a yellow and like pale pink. But it's not showing up a ton, and I think it goes really nicely with the with kind of the lines and the way the back is very graphic. So I don't think it like stands out too much, and I think it will be nice. And then I'm going to do the binding in this yellow fabric. I have enough fabric that I'm just going to do the binding in that. So that is what I'm working on. My hope is that I will get in some sessions this week, and then maybe get in a bunch of time next weekend and maybe finish it. I don't know if I can. It may take me another week more than that, but I'm glad to have it in progress, and it lets me turn my attention to the one that I want to do next. So I'm thinking about that as well. So that is it for me this week. I know it's a little bit shorter than usual. I usually keep it to 20 to 30 minutes, and we're at like 1850 right now. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you are finding joy in your projects. I am kind of dipping in and out and reading, and it's been nice to get back outside again. So I'm not always motivated to exercise in the winter, but it's really nice when spring comes and the weather's beautiful and I just want to be outside. So maybe I'll take my quilting outside or my knitting outside this week. That's a good thought. Anyway, I hope that you are having a lovely week and feeling very crafty. If you are in the northern hemisphere, that maybe spring is starting to sort of poke its head out and let you know that it's on the way. We actually changed clocks this weekend, so it's now lighter earlier in the day, and that is really nice too. It'll also be lighter later in the day. The days are getting longer. I guess it's not lighter earlier in the day. It's lighter later in the day now, but the days are getting longer, so pretty soon it will be light on both ends. Anyway, I hope that you have a lovely week ahead. I wish you lots of fun crafting, and I will say, as I always do, happy spinning, happy knitting, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.